the theme of what I came across just last week in some meditations, where it said, tending the soil of the heart for the fruit of life. That's been my experience of every aspect of my life in this community at Tarragindi, where we've been helping one another to recognise Christ in each other, to recognise Christ as we grow and understand and learn and develop, and to really see the fulfilment of that as people blossom and use their gifts and encourage one another. And the way in which others come in and let's participate, it's handed on to new people who come and take their role and grow in faith. And you see that in people's lives being changed. You see that in people, just their demeanour, just their approach, that they find a new peace and a new understanding and new growth. And that's been wonderful. To have things like the Alpha program, where we opened up to not only our church people, the wider community, and have a few people coming in, just again, that growth and that understanding and that knowledge of who they are, what their faith is, what they're called into. To me, that was really what we as a community are about. And then we can share that on our everyday living with others outside, and they can see and know there's a difference in us and what makes that difference. And so the questions can be asked and we can begin to sort of share that message. Well, there was a moment when we agreed that we would move into cooperation. And just the experience of two congregations then coming together, and the goodwill and the energy and the love and the concern of that. Yes, there were a few that sort of thought it was difficult, but how do we manage that through? And it was great to see the way in which people came together with the willingness to see Christ at work in that. That was great.
What was happening? What was happening at that time? Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, the driver for that was that the congregation up on the hill, where now the Manchester Church House is, and what's the Christadelphian Church, that was the Presbyterian Church, and they were in the process of raising funds to build a new church. This church had just been built here and had a debt. And it turned out that the debt that we had just about matched the amount of money that they'd raised for their church. So they thought, rather than build another church on the hill, let's get together. So that material side of things was the driver of us coming together. But out of that was a wonderful experience of sharing, as I said before, the role of the laity, the leadership, the strength that they brought to that. Because it was the laity that did all the work in that. It was the laity that drove that. And it was their passion to see not just the people becoming here, but what we could do as a community within our community, the wider community. So that was passionate. The coming together of children in worship, children being part of Sunday school, but more than that, and seeing the integration. Not that children became part of, bringing in, not adult worship, not all age worship, but the fact of how do we manage to be accepting of children in worship. One of the most joyous experiences was when our children first became introduced to communion and part of the communion service. And I remember the children parading in the elements to be accepted. I've never seen such a reverence among young children in that day. And had ones from 4 or 5 year old right up to 14, 15 year olds. And that was to me amazing. God was at work there in the stillness of that and their understanding of what was happening. Not understanding, but their appreciation that here was something that they were a part of. That was marvellous. The other thing that I mentioned was starting out the new life in terms of providing for the men of the church who were missing out on a whole range of things. The development of the growing of the men and their experience of their faith and so forth. So another fellow and I, it's time that we did something. So we got the men of the church together, and about 25 was gathered together, and all agreed we wanted to participate in that. So not all could come at once or at the same time, but we started that out. And that's grown 40 years later. We've still got the remnants of that sort of occurring and growing. But out of that was that growth and development of the faith of people. And you could see that in people's lives. You could see people searching and finding a new way, a new life, a new path ahead, and a new understanding of what God was calling them to. So yes, in terms of future, it's about being open to the possibilities. being open to, or not scared of new experiences and new things that would come to us. And I think one of the most marvellous things at the moment is the opportunity with the op shop and what that means. And the fact that it's not about us, it's really about the community. It's being out there in the community and involving the community in what's happening. I pray every day that we will look to the future of that, and certainly that God will bring that to success. By success, I don't mean just the success stop, but in terms of our outreach, in terms of the blessings, that it will be to those who become part of that and become involved in that and share in that. Because if we look around, reaching out to the community is very difficult. How do we know the needs are there unless we're out amongst it? And that's one of the differences we have as being just ordinary day people, because often our people we meet up with and communicate with are a limited core of people. How do we get beyond that? And of course, what's happening with Meg and the reach out inside, again, another thing. It's not about bringing people into our church. It's not about growing our church and our numbers. It's about searching out so that those who will meet Christ and know Christ and find Christ, find him where they're at. I remember years ago when I was doing my lay preacher's training, one of the things that I was read and taught is that the normal things of life, thirst, hunger, those sort of things, are things that we can satisfy. But unless we stimulate our thirst and our hunger for the spiritual things, there's not that stimulus there. But as that thirst and hunger is stimulated, so it's never satisfied until we keep on thirsting and hungering for it. And how do you develop that desire, that purpose in the people that are part of our communities? And that really has been what my passion has been through life. And I trust that I've had the privilege of doing that through preaching and teaching and through leading. And I hope that that has continued and passed on to others who will grow in that place. And really that's the role, not just simply of clergy who are there to help and assist, but it's the role of the laity to do that. And where the laity gives that leadership and that direction, the church and the people will grow inside. The soil of the heart is tended and the fruit of life will express itself. God will be there and God will be at work. When people come, we're so self-satisfied in our lives today. We have so much that we give in there. And it's only when people get to rock bottom, where there's nothing that they have left, that suddenly all that is there is that prompting, that desire, that willingness and ableness to worship God, to find God, to discover God. And that's where the hunger comes from, that deep desire. So we have to stimulate that. It's only when we get to rock bottom that we find that's all that's left for us. So how do we delve down there now and be able to bring it up and build on it so we achieve what God calls us to be?
Without manufacturing a crisis.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's fine.
Well, it's very easy to ignore our need of God and our dependence on God when we have so much, we're privileged with so much.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the problem of society today, that we think what we have is our own generation. We don't believe that God has given us that. We think we've generated it ourselves. Well, that's the other thing we don't do well enough. We don't affirm one another often enough. We don't sort of encourage one another often enough. We need to do that to encourage people to say, hey, yes, I am doing okay. I'm on this track. I remember years ago in this community, we'd done the strategic planning and so forth. And we decided we needed to have a review before we nicked on to the next places. And I remember we up in the hall there, we sat down one morning over morning tea, and we'd asked the woman to give us a review of what her understanding was of how we'd met the various things. And as we went through them, people were saying, oh, I didn't realise we'd done that. Oh, I didn't realise we'd achieved that. Oh, I didn't realise that had happened. So it's making ourselves aware and being prepared to congratulate ourselves and acknowledge ourselves and encourage ourselves and to recognise that God is there behind what we're doing and to see him at work and to give our praise and glory to him in what happens. There are lots of opportunities which will come up. It's just being ready to recognise them when we do. And to me, again, it comes back at having the people ready and growing. as I say, to me, the most valuable part of this community, not the most valuable part, but a really valuable part, is that sharing with a small group of people in a home group. Knowing their experiences, sharing with their hurts and their sufferings, their joys and their experiences, and relating that back to, well, how is God working in us? And out of that, taking the next step. And seeing the opportunities when they come. Because it's only as we're aware of other things, our own sort of awareness is fairly limited. It's only as we relate to other people. And you do that best in small groups. I'm sure that's why Christ had 12 disciples. In there, he had many hangers-on elsewhere. But the only group was 12 groups. And I've always been passionate about the fact of how we get time. It means setting time aside to work together, to be there for one another, to help one another. Yes, each Sunday morning it's great, or whenever we get to meet with people, it's great. But it's also good to be able to share. And you don't need someone to sort of say, oh, we provide that and there. Just, if you want to do that, get a group of friends together and start. And ask people for, well, where do we go? Where are resources? What do we do? What are we going to talk about? How do we go? You'll find you'll never stop talking. And if we can base that on something that Christ is speaking to us, and the way God speaks to us through scriptures in new ways, it's a living word because it relates to us today and it speaks to us today. And how do we then share that? How do we grow in that? And how do we then pass it on so others understand it and know it? And it's only as we cast that ripple effect that others take it out to the groups they meet with and on beyond that. That's how we reach out into the community. And then out of that, there'll become a concern and an issue that we found with the op shop that I mentioned, with Meg, with other issues. The concern I have, one of the concerns, having a passion in the past for youth and children's ministries, how do we continue and look for the newness of that? Because the access we have to work with children is sort of crowded in this day and age by all the sort of protocols and things we have to face. How do we overcome that to get onto the basis of the message we're trying to get across? So there's wonderful opportunities. It's just a matter of being prepared and being open and ready when those opportunities arise. Well, for me personally, it means growing in my understanding of who Christ is and what Christ calls me to. And then seeing how does that play out in my living, my daily living, what I'm doing. We think of the fruit of the Spirit, of what the blessings are that come to us, but those blessings go out to others in the way we share, the way we live, the way we sort of interact and interrelate with other people. It's about developing a relationship, not our relationship with God, but our relationship with one another. And that's based upon our understanding of our calling to be part of, I love Paul's description of that we are the body of Christ. We each have our different part to play. And when each person finds their part to play and they're playing it fully, then the body is functioning normally. And how do you encourage people and develop people to, A, take that step, be brave enough and to step out and say, yes, I can do that. And then discovering, hey, there is a role for me here. There is something for me to do and I can help others. And I can be Christ and the body of Christ in this place so that we work together. That's the richness of tending the soil of the heart. It's not only my heart, it's your heart, it's our heart as a people. And the heart of the body of Christ is then expressed through each one of us. One other thing that I'm really, I guess, concerned about and would be glad to see happen is coming out of COVID, or what it might be post-COVID, how we reach out to regather those that have drifted away or been sort of some, so that we can continue. I mean, if they've chosen to go elsewhere and are living their faith that way, that's great. But if they're on those belfries, how do we bring them, gather them and rekindle that passion, that fervour, that growth to develop? And so that they then are back to part of that continuum of into the community. So that's a challenge for us, I think. I'm not sure what post-COVID is going to look like. We're still in this.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll always be in it. So that's going to be a challenge.